I'd like to call the hearing to order, and since we have a quorum, I would ask the committee to consider 2 civilian nominations and a list of 27 pending military nominations. First, I ask the committee to consider the following civilian nominations: Mr. Ronald Cohane to be Assistant Secretary of Defense for Manpower and Reserve Affairs, and the Honorable Nicholas H. Girton to be the Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Research, Development, and Acquisition. Is a motion to favorably report these two nominations?
Moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Finally, I ask the committee to consider a list of 27 pending military nominations. All of these nominations have been before the committee the required length of time. Is there a motion to favorably report this list of 27 pending military nominations?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Thank you very much. Welcome, Secretary Austin, General Milley, and Secretary McCord. Before I get into my statement, I want to take a moment to recognize the tragic disasters that struck Mississippi and Alabama this weekend. Our hearts are certainly with the people of Mississippi and Alabama after tornadoes caused terrible loss of life and intense damage. And I know Senator Wicker, Senator Tuggle are doing everything they can to help their states, and we're thinking about the families and loved ones who were suffering.
Thank you very much.
Quite all right. Good morning. The committee meets today to receive testimony on the President's budget request for the Department of Defense for fiscal year 2024. Witnesses this morning are Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, Undersecretary of Defense Comptroller Michael McCord, and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley. Thank you for appearing before us today, and please extend the committee's thanks to the service members and defense civilians in the department. I'd like to take a moment to recognize that this will be General Milley's final posture hearing before his retirement later this year. General, you have served this nation for 43 years with honor, skill, and steadfast leadership, and we are deeply grateful. We thank your family for their support throughout your service, and we congratulate you on a very well-deserved retirement. Thank you, sir. Earlier this month, President Biden released his fiscal year 2024 budget request for the Department of Defense with a top line of $842 billion. As the President's budget recognizes and as his national defense strategy makes clear, China is our primary competitor. The PRC is the only nation with both the intent and the capability to challenge the security and economic interests of the United States and our allies and partners. At the same time, Russia remains a violent, destabilizing force. Putin's assault on Ukraine is inflicting horrific suffering on innocent civilians, threatening European stability, and harming the global economy. However, if Putin thought his war would drive a wedge between NATO members and the international community, he was badly mistaken. The international community has united in a way not seen in decades, and our potential adversaries around the world are taking note. The Biden administration and the witnesses before us today deserve great credit for leading this effort. In addition to the threats posed by Russia and China, nations like Iran and North Korea continue to push the boundaries of military brinksmanship, and issues like terrorism and climate change remain persistent. Prevailing in this environment will require thoughtful strategies and a budget that is structured to meet the challenges we face. During today's hearing, I would ask our witnesses to update us on the strategic planning documents published over the past year, including the National Defense Strategy, National Military Strategy, Nuclear Posture Review, and Missile Defense Review, and how the 2024 budget will execute these strategies. An essential element for the United States' long-term strategic competition will be our ability to build the joint capabilities of our armed forces across all domains, including space, cyber, and information operations. As the Defense Department's recently released joint concept for competing makes clear, the object of our nation's adversaries is to win without fighting. The concept warns that if we do not adapt to the realities of long-term competition, quote, the United States risks ceding strategic influence, advantage, and leverage while preparing for war that never comes. I'm interested to hear from our witnesses how this budget supports joint capabilities to ensure our military remains the world's premier fighting force. To that end, I'm encouraged that the budget includes the largest ever request for research, development, testing, and evaluation, a total of $145 billion. The budget would provide significant funding for modernization areas such as microelectronics, artificial intelligence, hypersonics, and 5G, technologies that will be critical for our national defense. Our strategy towards China and Russia should not be solely defined in dollars by how much, but rather where and why we are investing to achieve the greatest comparative advantage. Keeping our competition with China front and center, this budget request includes $9.1 billion for priorities covered by the Pacific Deterrence Initiative, or PDI. I am encouraged by the progress we have made through PDI thus far, and this committee will continue working to help improve the design and posture of the joint force in the Indo-Pacific region. This should include strengthening logistics, modernizing infrastructure, conducting exercises, and training and building the capabilities of our allies and partners. Indeed, our approach to the Indo-Pacific should be informed in part by lessons drawn from the European Defense and Deterrence Initiative, or EDI, which has played a decisive role in strengthening Ukraine for the last 9 years. The Department's 2024 budget request wisely includes $3.4 billion for EDI-related investments and $300 million for the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative. I'm also pleased to see that this budget request prioritizes taking care of our men and women in uniform and the civilians who serve alongside them by providing an across-the-board pay raise of 5.2%. This pay increase sends an important message to the workforce at a time when recruiting is particularly challenging. The budget request also includes $16.7 billion for military construction projects, and I'm particularly pleased to see increases in barracks sustainment. The improvements to our facilities, repair, and modernization will go a long way toward the joint forces' readiness and quality of life of our military personnel. With regard to our nuclear strategy, I understand that the budget request supports important steps for the modernization of our nuclear triad. Given the reckless behavior of Putin over the past year, our allies and partners depend on our extended deterrence now more than ever. We must also be acutely aware of China's rapidly growing arsenal. Modernization of our strategic forces is needed to reassure not only our allies, but deter any attack on our homeland by any of our nuclear-armed competitors. Even as we modernize, we should seek ways to promote strategic stability, reduce the risk of miscalculation, and if possible, reduce nuclear stockpiles when verifiable for all parties. Given these strategic threats, the proposed investments in tried and true platforms like the Columbia and the Virginia-class submarines is a prudent decision. Similarly, this budget supports the further development of long-range stealth bombers, strengthening the fighter fleet, and building up the defense industrial base, including upgrades to the Navy's public and private shipyards. At the same time, taxpayers should not have to pay for programs or systems that are wasteful or ineffective, and Congress must not shirk its responsibility to divest outdated platforms in favor of more effective new technologies. We are engaged in a struggle between autocracy and democracy, and we cannot fail in succeeding in that struggle. Again, I'd like to thank the witnesses for their participation today. I look forward to testimony, and let me now recognize Ranking Member Senator Wicker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I too want to thank our distinguished witnesses for being here. For the third year in a row, President Biden has sent to Congress a budget request that cuts military spending amid a more dangerous and complex threat environment. We are in the most crucial years of our efforts to prevent aggression by our peer adversary, the Chinese Communist Party. The cost of failure in this effort would be nearly unthinkable. Despite international efforts to the contrary, Russia was not deterred from invading Ukraine, and that invasion has already cost the global economy well over $1 trillion, in addition to untold suffering and loss of life. These costs will continue to mount unless we give the Ukrainians every single tool they need to win as soon as possible. Our intelligence community tells us a deterrence failure over Taiwan would make the economic effect of Ukraine conflict look vanishingly small. This year's budget is the last one that funds capabilities that are likely to be fielded before 2027. That's the year by which Xi Jinping says he wants the People's Liberation Army to be ready to take Taiwan. that makes our work here very urgent. I'm heartened to see that the budget request prioritizes some programs of critical importance to near-term deterrence and warfighting, including the Strategic Capabilities Office, DARPA-led Assault Breaker 2, electronic warfare and cyber programs, and the emerging efforts to deliver real warfighting capability out of the JADC2 program. These near-term, high-return investments are crucial. Even so, I remain concerned that we are not moving fast enough on some of these efforts. At the same time, while the National Defense Strategy emphasizes the importance of our posture in the Western Pacific, I note this budget actually cuts the level of spending on key planning and design activities. This is despite the clear congressional signal sent by Senators Reid and Inhofe in the statute when they created the Pacific Deterrence Initiative several years ago. We cannot successfully deter Xi with a brittle basing and logistics infrastructure. Further, we must work together to think bigger and more creatively about the scale of investment and focus needed to compete with Beijing in the decades to come. Our current nuclear modernization efforts are moving too slowly and will produce a force ill-equipped to deter multiple nuclear-armed adversaries. The current approach to rebuilding our shipbuilding industrial base is also woefully insufficient. The Department of Defense has failed our shipbuilders by promising stability and then pulling the rug out from under them. This has hit amphibious shipbuilders particularly hard. This budget also fails by actually shrinking the U.S. Navy this year and in future years, instead of growing the fleet as is required by law. Congress, again, will need to rectify these failures. Yet even where Congress and the Department of Defense have agreed on our approach, such as with the submarine industrial base, progress has been too slow or non-existent. We need to make generational investments across our basic defense infrastructure, including shipyards, munitions, and ammunition plants, advanced test ranges, and even barracks for our service members, and I do appreciate the chair emphasizing that in his statement. Similarly, we cannot effectively compete with and deter our adversaries with the recruiting deficiencies we've heard about, for example, at last week's hearing. I hope our witnesses will address this issue and state whether this budget contains every single possible investment that could alleviate the recruiting crisis. Lastly, I want to discuss the department's relationship with Congress. I think we have some work to do on this front. And let me mention two instances. First, on February 8, I sent the Secretary of Defense a letter asking some simple questions about the facts and decision-making surrounding the Chinese spy balloon. This was signed by Senator Rubio, the co-chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee. 3 weeks later, a deputy wrote back with a non-answer, which I can only describe as dismissive. So I sent another letter reiterating my request. Yesterday afternoon, the day before this hearing, I finally received a response to my letter from the Secretary. I have significant questions about that response, and I will address that in questions for the record. So that's one thing. Also, early last Thursday morning, an Iranian-backed attack killed one American contractor and injured several U.S. service members in Syria. These troops are there to ensure that ISIS does not pose a threat to the United States. That very day, the Senate was considering several significant votes relating to the use of force against Iran. And yet no member of the Senate, to my knowledge, was told that day about an attack by this very adversary while we were voting on issues involving them. Given the number of legislative affairs personnel that the office of the Secretary has, I find it hard to believe that no one in the executive branch was tracking the votes on the Senate floor or thought of the nexus between our decisions and the very acts that were going on the other side of the globe. It is unacceptable that no one informed the Senate of this attack in a timely manner. Mr. Secretary and Mr. Chairman, we're all in this together. We're all on the same side here. I would strongly prefer that the Biden administration treat the Congress as a partner moving forward. And I thank the witnesses for appearing today. Again, I thank them for their service, and I look forward to their testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Wicker, and let me recognize Secretary Austin. Mr. Secretary, please.
Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Wicker, and distinguished members of the committee, at the outset, let me echo your comments, Chairman, regarding the tragedies that we've just witnessed in Mississippi and in Alabama, and our condolences go out to all. I'm glad to be here with you today to testify in support of the President's budget request for fiscal year 2024. I'm joined, as always, by General Milley, and I remain grateful for his leadership. I'm also glad to be joined by the Department's comptroller and CFO, Mike McCord. This is a strategy-driven budget and one driven by the seriousness of our strategic competition with the People's Republic of China. At $842 billion, it is a 3.2% increase over fiscal year 23 enacted, and it is 13.4% higher than fiscal year 22 enacted. And this budget will help us continue to implement our national defense strategy and the President's national security strategy. Now, I have three key priorities: to defend our nation, to take care of our outstanding people, and to succeed through teamwork. The PRC is our pacing challenge, and we're driving hard to meet it. Our budget builds on our previous investments to deter aggression. We're investing in a more resilient force posture in the Indo-Pacific and increasing the scale and the scope of our exercises with our partners. And this budget includes a 40% increase over last year's budget for the Pacific Deterrence Initiative. And it's an all-time high of $9.1 billion. And that will fund a stronger force posture, better defenses for Hawaii and Guam, and deeper cooperation with our allies and partners. Now, this budget also makes the department's largest ever investments in both R&D and procurement. We're requesting more than $61 billion to sustain air dominance. That includes funding for our fighters and the extraordinary B-21 strategic bomber that I helped unveil last December. We're also seeking more than $48 billion for sea power, including new construction of 9 battle force ships. And we're boosting capacity in America's shipyards to build the ships that our strategy demands. We're investing a total of $1.2 billion in the submarine industrial base. And we're buying 2 Virginia-class attack submarines and 1 Columbia-class missile submarine. On land, we're investing in air and missile defense and in defenses to counter unmanned aerial vehicles. We're also requesting $11 billion to deliver the right mix of long-range fires, including major investments in hypersonics. We'll also continue to modernize all 3 legs of our nuclear triad and bolster our strategic deterrence. And we put forward the largest space budget in Pentagon history. We've requested $33.3 billion to improve our capabilities and our resilience in space. Now, let me again thank Congress for providing the department with multi-year procurement authorities and appropriations for critical munitions. In this budget, we're requesting more multi-year procurement authorities, and we're asking for more than $30 billion to further invest in the industrial base and to buy the maximum number of munitions that American industry can produce. This budget also moves us away from aging capabilities that aren't relevant to future conflicts, so we can focus on the advances that our warfighters will need. Now, our national defense strategy calls out Putin's highly aggressive Russia as an acute threat. And under President Biden's leadership, the United States has rallied the world to help Ukraine fight Russia's indefensible invasion. We've reinforced NATO's defense and deterrence on its eastern flank. Our allies and partners have provided crucial security assistance coordinated through the Ukraine Defense Contact Group that I lead. And we will support Ukraine's defense for as long as it takes. Meanwhile, the department remains vigilant against other persistent threats, including North Korea and Iran. And we will take all necessary measures to defend our troops and our interests overseas, as seen in our recent airstrikes against facilities linked to Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. And we're also investing in over-the-horizon counterterrorism capabilities. And Mr. Chairman, our joint force stands ready to meet any challenge. You could see the force's readiness after Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine, when we swiftly deployed elements of the 3rd Infantry Division to Poland to shore up NATO's eastern flank. And we closely monitor readiness at the unit level and maintain response forces at our highest states of readiness, while the rest of the force, by design, is preparing for future contingencies. So this budget will help us maintain our readiness with $146 billion in funding for operations, training, and maintenance. This budget also invests in improving our readiness and resilience in the face of climate change and other 21st century threats. Mr. Chairman, we're going to remain the strongest military in the world. And as we mark the 50th anniversary of our all-volunteer force, I am enormously proud of the brave men and women who choose to wear the cloth of our nation. We owe it to them and to their families to take the best possible care of all of our people. And over the past 2 years, we've made moves easier, we've cut commissary prices, and we've made child care more affordable. And this budget funds other key steps to increase the quality of life of our teammates, including the largest military and civilian pay raises in decades. Now, we're also pushing hard to help eliminate suicide in our ranks, including immediate steps to hire more mental health professionals and improve access to mental health care. And meanwhile, we're working toward a military that's free of sexual assault. We worked with Congress to improve the response of sexual assault and related crimes under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and those reforms will be fully implemented by the end of this year. And the department is also investing in a specialized workforce to combat sexual assault, harassment, suicide, and more. Now, the department's 3rd priority is succeeding through teamwork. And our rival network of allies and partners magnifies our power and expands our security. And in recent months, our friends in the Indo-Pacific have taken major steps forward. The Philippines has agreed to nearly double the number of sites where we cooperate together. Japan is committed to double its defense spending. And through the historic AUKUS partnership, we'll work with our Australian and British allies to build game-changing defense advantages that will deter aggression and boost our defense industrial capacity. In sum, Mr. Chairman, this is the budget that will meet this moment, and I respectfully ask for your support. And the single most effective way that this committee can support the department and our outstanding troops is with an on-time, full-year appropriation. So I look forward to working with all of you so that we can continue to defend our democracy and support the forces of freedom in this hour of challenge. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary General Milley. Do you have a statement?
I do, Chairman. And Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Wicker, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. And I want to echo the condolences of both the Secretary and the Chairman for the great people of Mississippi and Alabama. Tragic losses. Our hearts go out to them, and many, many soldiers and sailors, airmen, Marines in uniform come from your 2 great states. So our hearts go out to you. I've been privileged to defend this country for 43 consecutive years in uniform. And as the chairman said, this is likely my last set of posture hearings. But I do want to thank the Congress for the continued support to our military not only on this budget, but for the last 4 decades. And I ask that you support this year's request with an on-time budget approval. I'm honored to represent here today the soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, guardians, and families of the United States Joint Force, along with Secretary Austin and Mike McCord. I want to publicly thank them both for their leadership. Our joint force, as the Secretary said, is the most lethal and capable military in the world because of your support. Our purpose, the military's purpose, the uniformed military, is simple. It's to defend the United States, and our task is to fight and win in all the domains of combat to secure America and prevent great power war. Readiness for us in uniform, and readiness now and readiness in the future through modernization is our #1 priority, and there is no other #1 other than the readiness for combat. The Joint Force will accomplish this at the fiscal year 24 budget request of $842 billion. Right now, as pointed out by Senator Wicker, the international system is under stress. For the first time, the United States is facing 2 major nuclear powers whose vital national security interests are in competition with the United States. Both the People's Republic of China and Russia have the means to threaten our interests and our way of life. But war with either one is neither inevitable nor imminent. Great power war has not happened in the last 80 years, in large part because of the rules put in place at the end of World War II and the capabilities of the United States military along with our allies and partners. We must remain the most powerful nation, and the great power peace then will be prevailing. The People's Republic of China remains our #1 long-term geostrategic security challenge. The PRC intends to be the regional hegemon in Asia within the next 10 years and to exceed the United States' overall military capability by mid-century, and they have publicly stated 2049. The PRC's actions are moving it down the path towards potential confrontation with its neighbors and the United States. But again, war with China is neither inevitable nor imminent. Additionally, Russia is an acute threat and remains quite dangerous. Over a year ago, Russia undertook an illegal and unprovoked war against Ukraine, threatening the peace on the European continent and global stability. We are supporting Ukraine to protect its sovereignty and supporting NATO with the United States force presence in every single nation on NATO's eastern flank. This fight is not just in Ukraine's interest. It is in the United States' interest to protect the system that has prevented great power war. In Iran threatens to push the Middle East into regional instability by supporting terrorists and proxy forces, as we recently saw. Just last week, Iranian-aligned groups killed 1 American and injured 7 in attacks on coalition bases in Syria. We acted immediately to defend our troops, and we will continue to counter terrorist threats in the region and anywhere else we find them. And Iran has taken actions also to improve its capabilities to produce a nuclear weapon. From the time of an Iranian decision, Iran could produce enough fissile material for a nuclear weapon in less than 2 weeks, and it would only take several months thereafter to produce an actual nuclear weapon. The United States remains committed, as a matter of policy, that Iran will not have a nuclear weapon. The United States military has developed multiple options for our national leadership to consider if or when Iran decides to develop a nuclear weapon. North Korea's continued ballistic missile testing and nuclear weapons development pose threats to our homeland and our allies and partners. But we stand together shoulder to shoulder with the Republic of Korea to deter North Korean aggression as we have for 7 decades. Terrorists continue to operate around the globe, threatening fear, destruction, destabilization, and this budget supports our continued counterterrorism effort. In short, the United States military stands ready to protect our nation's interests and the American people. We are currently standing watch on freedom's frontier with nearly 250,000, 250,000 troops in Europe, Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and South America. The United States never fights alone. A key source of our strength is our large global network of alliances and partnerships. Just this month, we conducted 63 operations and joint and combined exercises globally with our allies and partners. And lastly, our operational readiness rates are higher now than they've been in many years. Currently, 60% of our active force is at the highest state of readiness and could deploy to combat in less than 30 days. well exceeding our minimum standard of 1/3 of the force. 10%, in fact, could deploy in less than 96 hours. This military, the United States military, is ready. The joint force is at an inflection point, and we must balance operations readiness and modernization. We must not allow ourselves to create the false trap that we can either modernize our forces for the future or focus only on today. We must do both. We must integrate advancing technologies, including precision long-range fires, hypersonic weapons, quantum computing, artificial intelligence, robotics, and all-domain sensors. The time is now. We have very little margin to wait. And the common thread critical to accomplish all of this is our people. We must continue investing in training, education, and talent management to be prepared for the future operating environment. I urge Congress to support this budget's significant pay raise, health care, housing, and child care initiatives. This budget sustains our readiness and adapts the joint force to the future warfighting requirements. There is nothing more expensive than fighting a war. Preparing for war is very expensive, but nothing more expensive than fighting it. And preparing for war will deter war, and that is our goal. We must act with clear-eyed urgency in order to deter great power war. By doing so, no adversary should ever underestimate the resolve of our nation and the strength of our military. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, General Milley. Secretary McCord, do you have a statement?
No, Mr. Chairman, other than to wish your staff director a speedy recovery.
Thank you very much. Secretary Austin and General Milley, logistics is not the most exciting topic, but in many cases it's one of the most crucial topics, particularly in the Pacific, where distance is as much an enemy as our opposing forces. First, Ms. Secretary, and then General Milley, can you comment upon the investments we're making in our modernizing our logistics, particularly in the Indo-PACOM area, command and control activities that would help deliver these resources to our troops?
Thanks, Chairman. As I stated earlier, in this budget, we're asking to invest some $9.1 billion in the Pacific Deterrence Initiative. That will enable us to strengthen forward infrastructure so we can continue to forward deploy troops, so that will enable us to deter further forward in theater. In addition to that, we've pushed a number of our sustainment elements, like fuel, further into the theater, and we continue to make sure that we have a diverse and agile footprint so that we can rapidly respond to any challenge. But I think that we're investing in the right things and going after the right capabilities to make sure that we can operate further forward.
Thank you. General Milley, please.
Yes, Senator, thank you. Key here is one of the keys here is ammunition, and the Secretary has directed that we analyze all of our ammunition stockages in light of what's going on in Ukraine. That's a key area that we need to increase our capabilities here in the coming years, is ammunition. The second piece there is lift. In the area of lift, both sea lift and air lift, there's a lot of investments in this budget and previous budgets. That'll be an area that requires continued sustained levels of effort is in order to move the force. Projecting power is a key attribute of the U.S. military, and we do that through sea lift and air lift. So that's a second key point. And the last one I would say is the posture. The Secretary has initiated a series with the Indo-PACOM commander, a series of posture adjustments in the Pacific, which should better position us for sustainment, logistical sustainment, if any conflict ever happens.
Thank you very much. Mr. Secretary, we are in a moment where we're having a challenge getting general officers off the floor of the Senate and to their assigned stations after they've been recommended by the Department of Defense and cleared in terms of their performance and their capabilities. Can you tell us what the cumulative effects of this would be in terms of denying promotions to people who are going to take key jobs?
Thanks, Chairman. The effects are absolutely critical in terms of the impact on the force. This is one of the busiest times, or one of the most complex times that we've seen lately. We see a war, the largest conflict in Europe since World War II. We see an aggressive China operating in the Indo-Pacific. We see Iranian-backed elements going after our troops. And there are a number of things happening globally that indicate that we could be in a contest on any one given day. Not approving the recommendation for promotions actually creates a ripple effect through the force that makes us far less ready than we need to be. If you look at what we have coming up, I mean, there are 5 3-star promotions that are near term, and one of those is the commander of our fleet out in the Gulf, and that's a critical position. Then that starts to multiply. 70 more positions, 3- and 4-star positions over time. They include the chiefs of the Army, the Marine Corps, the Navy, and also the chairman's replacement at some point in time, although nobody wants to see that happen. So the effects are cumulative, and it will affect families. It will affect kids going to schools because they won't be able to change their duty station, and so it's a powerful effect and will impact on our readiness.
As I look forward, I have never in my almost 3 decades here seen so many key military positions coming up for replacement. We have the Commandant of the Marine Corps, the Chief of Staff of the Army, the CNO of the Navy, and as you mentioned, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, by law, has to leave in September. And if we cannot resolve this situation, we will be, in many respects, leaderless and at a time of great conflict. So I would hope we would expedite and move quickly on this front. Thank you. With that, let me recognize Senator Wicker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me just start with a couple of short answers. I hope these will be. Secretary Austin, first, would you agree that this is the most complex and dangerous threat environment since World War II?
Yes, Senator, I would say that it's one of the most complex periods that we've seen.
General Milley.
Yes, Senator, for sure.
Okay. Over the past 2 years, Congress has added nearly $30 billion to the President's request in FY22 and $45 billion to the President's request in FY23, $75 billion added over the request of the President. Have these additional resources increased our national security and decreased military risk, Mr. Secretary?
They have, Senator. It always helps when you get additional resources, but if you get additional resources with additional requirements, it doesn't help as much. And also, if we can stop doing some of the things that create a drag on our force in terms of causing us to spend money on things that are not relevant in a future fight, that also helps as well. So we appreciate Congress's support in the past for allowing us to get rid of things that are no longer relevant.
And you're welcome on that. General Milley, same question. Has this $75 billion added to our national defense expenditures, have those funds increased our national security?
Yes, I believe they have.
And decreased military risk?
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much. Secretary Austin, the Biden administration has authority to send $1 billion worth of U.S. weaponry to Taiwan. That is similar to the policy and the authority we authorize with regard to Ukraine. Will the Biden administration exercise this $1 billion in drawdown authority that that Congress provided last year?
We will, Senator, and my team is working diligently to make sure that we have the right capabilities in that particular drawdown. Of course, we have the authority. We'll need the appropriations as well. So.
Okay, you'll need an appropriation to replenish that. Is that correct?
That's correct, Senator.
And the administration will be requesting a replenishment funding for the transferred defense articles. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Let me then talk about your assessment with regard to Ukraine. I believe you told me, Secretary Austin, that you believe Ukraine now has the upper hand in the war against Russia. Is that correct?
That's correct. This is a highly contested fight, Senator, as you know, and we've seen the tide move back and forth. Most recently, we've seen some pretty significant fighting in the Bakhmut area.
Right, but just with regard to your optimism about Ukraine having the upper hand, that is what you told me yesterday.
It is. Now, what I was about to say, Senator, is that Ukrainians have inflicted significant casualties on the Russians, and they have depleted their inventory of armored vehicles in a way that no one would have ever imagined. And so now we see Russia reaching for T-54s and T-55 tanks because of the level of damage that the Ukrainians have inflicted on them. And we have, in the meantime, been...
And reaching for those tanks demonstrates what to you, sir?
It demonstrates that their capability is waning. And we've continued to witness them be challenged with artillery munitions and other things, and they're reaching out to Iran, they're reaching out to North Korea. So I think, we'll see an increase in the fighting in the spring as conditions for maneuver improve. And based upon the things that we've done and continue to do, I think Ukraine will have a real good chance.
Do you believe? Yeah, we're pushed for time, sir. Do you believe there's a real chance for significant Ukrainian advancements between now and the beginning of winter?
I believe there's a chance, and we're doing everything that we can do to ensure that they have their best opportunity to be successful, Senator.
Thank you. And if the chair will indulge me, Mr. Secretary, you've got a pretty big congressional relations office in your shop, do you not?
I do.
Do you agree that it should have occurred to someone in that office to inform senators who were debating about Iran last Thursday about what had occurred with regard to attacks in Syria?
Senator, I think you know that we take the War Powers Act very, very seriously, and after every operation, we're required to brief Congress, and we lean forward and try to ensure that Congress is briefed before we conduct an operation. And we also, in this case, we had an attack and we launched an attack on the adversaries in the same time period, same short period of time. And so, because of that compressed time, we did both notifications at the same time. We should have notified you earlier, and we will endeavor to do so.
Well, as a matter of fact, Mr. Chairman, if I might, the attack occurred and counterattack occurred in the wee hours of the morning, and members of the Senate were not notified until very late in the afternoon or early evening. That is the fact, is it not?
No, sir. The attack occurred in the morning, and the counterattack occurred evening our time, Eastern time.
Okay, and so after the attack occurred, it did not dawn on anybody in congressional affairs to notify members who were debating this very issue on the Senate floor. I think that is correct.
Senator, our goal is to make sure that we keep you informed, and we will do everything within our power to make sure that we improve our performance.
Thank you very much, Senator Wicker. Senator Shaheen, please.
Thank you. Secretary Austin, General Milley, thank you both for being here this morning and for your service. And General Milley, thank you especially for all of the years that you have given to this country and to all of us. And we will miss you, even if you may not miss these posture hearings. Secretary Austin, I understand that the department may be in the final stages of the review of information operations that was required by the 2020 NDAA. Can you give us any insights into what that may show and how important you think information operations are as we look at the modern defense, and whether there's money in the budget requested to address expanded information operations?
Thanks, Senator. I think what we'll find is that that work will show that information operations is increasingly relevant and increasingly valuable in terms of enabling our operations, and also understanding and countering what our adversaries are doing. And so we will continue to work to refine our policies and procedures and develop talent in this area as well. But this is a key area, and we see it every day as we watch the Ukraine Russia fight and the relevance of those operations in that fight.
Well, one of the areas where information operations have been important is in the Black Sea region, and certainly we saw with the downing of the drone just how important that region is to our national security. Can you talk about what the most pressing threats are that Russia poses in the Black Sea, and what we're thinking about going forward as a strategy to respond to that?
Well, certainly, Senator, Russia would aim to completely control the Black Sea and deny our allies and partners the ability to have continuous access to the sea. You know, I was in the region before this fight started and had engaged with our allies and partners and talked to them about the importance of the access to the Black Sea, encouraged them to work together, and also wanted to make sure that we were doing everything within our power to help them strengthen their capability and strengthen their interoperability. So this is critical, and this is something that I think we need to continue to put energy into.
Well, thank you. I was in the region in February, and I can tell you in the countries that I visited, Georgia, Romania, that there was a great deal of interest in the fact that we might have a more comprehensive approach to the region that deals not just with national security, but also with economic and democratic initiatives there. Over the past several years alone, Congress has appropriated over $1 billion in funding for PFAS-related activities, testing, remediation. The most recent information I've seen suggests that there are more than 700 contaminated military sites across the country, including the former Pease Air Base. Congress has shown a willingness to accelerate testing and cleanup by increasing funding, and yet the department claims that it's unable to execute those increased funding levels. We appropriated $517 million, or authorized it, in fiscal year 2020. Can you speak to what needs to happen in order for the department to make better use of the funds that Congress appropriates to address PFAS?
We will continue to make every effort to make best use of those funds. I think you see in this budget we've asked for another $400 million. And to your point, Senator, if funds are not executed in one particular year, I think they roll over to the next year. So we have the benefit of using the funds that were not completely executed last year, plus the $400 million we're asking for this year. And we'll make every effort to make sure that we're doing everything within our that's possible to utilize the funds, and where we need more, we'll come back and ask you for more.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I hope you will also take a look at our willingness to be transparent with the public where sites have been contaminated, because there is a great deal of distrust, I think, about information sharing from the Department of Defense, and at least we've seen that in the site in New Hampshire, and I think that undermines our ability to address what needs to be done in those sites to clean up the contamination and to encourage the communities to do what they need to do to address the problem. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Sheen. Senator Fisher, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For years, we have underinvested in our munitions production, and we are starting to reverse that trend, but more needs to be done to increase production. Secretary Austin, what is the department currently doing to increase munitions production capacity, and what more does it seek to do in FY24?
Well, thank you, Senator. Let me thank Congress for what you've done to authorize multi-year procurement capability. That sends a strong signal to the industrial base. Also, the numbers that you see reflected in our budget request for procurement sends a strong signal as well. In this particular budget, we're asking for $30 billion to invest in munitions, and that helps us go after the right kinds of munitions that we think we need to replenish stocks and to make sure that we get ahead as well. And also, it allows us to invest a bit in the industrial base. Now, we're engaging our partners in industry and trying to do everything we can to work with them to expand their capacity and their capability. But to your point, there's a lot more work that needs to be done.
The committee has worked to modify or remove older unnecessary contracting requirements so we can get contracting officers to move faster on replacing munitions in Ukraine. Would it be useful to be able to remove or modify these unnecessary requirements for weapons related to really our most pressing challenges in the Western Pacific and in Taiwan as well?
Absolutely, Senator, it would.
Thank you. General Milley, the current U.S. Nuclear modernization plan was originally designed in 2010 when nuclear threats were much less severe than they are today. However, since then, every DoD modernization program, along with every Department of Energy infrastructure project and warhead program, has been delayed or it's been reduced in its scope. Can you tell me how we're going to meet the rapidly growing threats from China and Russia with a force that's smaller and with a force that delivers later than we planned for more than a decade ago? Basically, I'm asking you, how are we going to recognize challenges we have today and meet them?
Thanks, Senator. As you know, the nuclear capability of China is growing, and we can cover that in some detail in a classified session if you so desire. The recapitalization of the nuclear triad is the Secretary and the President's #1 defense priority. That is what has been one of the most significant contributors to great power peace in the last 8 decades. So it's imperative for us, the United States, to recapitalize that entire system with the silos, the bombers, as well as the subs, but also the NC-3 system. That's really critical, and it does bother me that some of these programs are behind and they're coming in at over cost, over budget. But we're going to get there, and it'll be a safe, secure, reliable system, guaranteed bet, and we'll maintain the strategic deterrence that we've kept for 80 years.
Last year, you, along with nearly every other senior U.S. military officer, testified that we need to provide presidents with more nuclear options than we have today. Do you still agree with that sentiment?
I do. I believe that...
Okay, thank you. Yes is fine.
Sure.
As a member of this committee and also as a member of the Senate Commerce Committee, I've worked for years to promote efficient spectrum management by the federal government without endangering the mission-critical operations of the Department of Defense. Coordination among the agencies can be difficult and it can be slow. Proactive communication among all stakeholders, I believe, is key for that better coordination. And that's why, as ranking member of the Strategic Force Subcommittee, I sent a letter to the subcommittee chairman, with the subcommittee chairman, Angus King, to the Department of Defense last year, that asks for more details about the department's concerns with proposed spectrum reallocation in the lower 3G. DOD's response pointed to the 2020 IDA report, but there's still far more details that we need to learn about what may or may not work for reallocation in this band. Fortunately, there is an ongoing study, and I appreciate that, the PATH study, that should provide those details. General Milley, my time is almost up, and I expect my friend from South Dakota will have a conversation with you about this as well. But for the record, and please answer yes or no, is it your best military advice that the ongoing PATH study, as currently authorized, should be completed in order to inform the ongoing spectrum negotiations?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Fisher. Before I recognize Senator Gilliland, let me just remind all of my colleagues there will be a classified hearing in the SCIF SVC 217 at the conclusion of this open hearing. Senator Gilliland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. McCord, I was disappointed that for the second year in a row, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or ARRO, was not fully funded in the department's budget request. Understanding that we cannot get into specific budget figures in this forum, can you discuss why ARRO was not fully funded?
Senator, I don't have any information from my colleague, Undersecretary Moultrie, that he needed additional funding in this area. It's a relatively new office we're standing up, so I was under the impression, I am under the impression that we have adequate funding for the relatively new state of this, but I will double back with him if there's a concern.
I need you to send a letter to this committee in writing about why it wasn't fully funded. Several senators signed a letter to Secretary Hicks asking that it be fully funded in this budget, and we specified in a classified annex exactly what funding wasn't being met. And it's operational funding. It's basic operational funding. So I'm highly concerned about this. Secretary Austin, the incidents last month involving the Chinese high-altitude balloon and the 3 unknown objects highlighted the need for us to continue to improve our understanding of UAPs over U.S. airspace. Do you intend to ensure ARRO receives full funding in the future?
I will, Senator, and in this budget, we've asked for $11 million in support of the office of that initiative. So.
That is not the budget request.
Okay.
Will you investigate why the budget request isn't being met and be part of the response to the committee?
I will.
Thank you. Secretary Austin, on March 7, Qin Gang, the Chinese foreign minister, said that the U.S. and China are heading toward inevitable, quote, confrontation and conflict, end of quote. This comes as the STRATCOM commander testified that the PRC seeks to match or in some areas surpass quantitative and qualitative parity with the United States in terms of nuclear weapons, end of quote. During the Cold War, the U.S. and the Soviet Union developed lines of communication to prevent escalation or outright hostilities during heightened tensions and developed norms and mechanisms to avoid miscalculations. How would you characterize your relationship with your PRC counterpart, and what steps are you taking to reduce the risk of miscalculations during a period of heightened competition between our countries?
Well, thanks, Senator. I think you've heard me say 2 things. The first thing is that what the chairman said earlier, that I don't see conflict as being imminent or inevitable. But I do think it's important that leaders and great powers have the ability to talk to each other, to manage escalation, to manage crisis. You've seen me reach out to my former counterpart, Minister of Defense Wei, who has now moved on, and encourage him to keep the lines of communication open. He has now been replaced by a new minister, and I've yet to have the ability to engage him, but I will continue to make sure that we reach out. I do think that's critical.
Secretary Austin, we have international legal structures to address the conduct of our forces in war. While we have international treaties that govern the use of space, there's ongoing debate about whether these treaties would apply during an armed conflict and what types of counter-space weapons are permissible. What steps is the department taking in coordination with the Department of State to reinforce international norms and whether we can safely rely on our use of space assets both legally and lethally during a conflict?
Well, this is an issue that the interagency of our administration. We continue to engage on, and Secretary Blinken, as you know, also has engaged our allies and partners on this issue at the UN and in other fora. We think it's important. The administration thinks it's important, and this is something that we'll continue to work on. So.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I appreciate the policies you issued on March 22nd supporting our military families, and it's critical to their well-being and ability to retain strong military force. DoD's own surveys show that 24% of our service members experience food insecurity. Last year, I met with military families on Staten Island who spoke about the challenges they face in basically putting food on the table to feed their kids. However, very few service members are considered eligible for basic needs allowance or the BNA under existing BNA programs, since BAH is included in family income calculations. Can you tell me how you intend to ensure that food insecurity in military families have access to the BNA or other measures?
Well, we'll have the authority next year to move to a higher number, a higher percentage, 150%. We'll actually move before we're required to move. We plan to move in July. That will allow us to help more families. But you've seen us with your support, Senator. You've seen us ask for a pay raise last year of 4.6%. You've seen us raise BAH amounts. And you've seen us work to get child care costs down. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to increase the resources and reduce the strain on families, and hopefully that total equation will create benefits for our families and our troops.
But will you consider removing BAH from the calculation for BNA?
We will do whatever feasible, what we're allowed to do by law.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Giltner. Senator Cotton, please.
Mr. Secretary, I want to return to the issue of the strikes in Syria last week and Senator Wicker's line of questioning about the timing of notification to Congress. You said that you, quote, should have notified Congress earlier. These attacks happened against our troops, killing one contractor early in the morning Eastern time. Do you believe that you should have notified us that morning while we were voting on amendments directly related to this kind of attack?
Again, there is no connection between when we notified you, Senator, and your vote. The chairman and I were testifying that morning as well. So as soon as we came out of testimony, we began work on crafting response options.
Secretary Austin, I don't believe you. I believe that your office specifically withheld notification of this deadly strike against Americans because the Rubio Amendment, on which we voted midday, directly touched on exactly this scenario, not repealing these use of force resolutions if the president couldn't certify that Iran was no longer attacking us in Iran and Syria. That's what I believe. Nothing you can say is going to change my belief about that. And I got to say, I think I speak for a lot of my colleagues.
I just want to say, Senator, that is absolutely not true.
Maybe you didn't personally do it. Maybe you didn't personally do it. But I believe entirely that people in your office did that. You have a vast legislative operation, as Senator Wicker pointed out. Do you really expect us to believe that they didn't know that we were voting on a Rubio amendment that directly covered exactly this kind of attack? I don't believe that. I don't believe it. I believe there's a conscious decision made not to inform Congress because you fear that it might lead to the passage of the Rubio amendment, which would kill the entire bill. But I want to move on to a more important part, which is these attacks in the first place. How many attacks has Iran or its proxies launched against American positions in Iran and Syria since Joe Biden took office?
There's been about 83 attacks, I think, since in the last several years.
That's a lot of attacks over 2 years. How many times have we retaliated against Iran or its proxies?
We've launched 4 major strikes, Senator, but an attack can consist of a number of things. It can consist of, a rocket that's fired in the direction of one of our bases, but not effective.
Mr. Secretary, I'm well aware of what an attack could entail. So 79-4 is Iran's record right now. And our 4 attacks have not been against Iran, right? They've been against Iran's proxies in Iraq or Syria or elsewhere. Is that correct?
This last attack was against IRGC, Quds Force infrastructure. And
okay. And after we retaliated, Iran attacked us again, injuring another American, didn't it?
They did.
And have we retaliated for that attack on Friday?
We have not yet, Senator.
So what kind of signal do we think this sends to Iran when they can attack us 83 times since Joe Biden has become president and we only respond 4? Maybe it's because they know that that we will not retaliate until they kill an American, which emboldens them to keep launching these attacks which kill Americans. What is our rules of engagement for on-the-ground commanders throughout the region? Are they allowed to engage immediately if their position has been attacked?
They can, and they do, and there have been several instances of that, Senator.
I've got to say, I've heard from company and field grade commanders who've been in the region very recently, and they say there's a lot of confusion over that. Let me move to a related topic, and that's our operations of unmanned aircraft in the Black Sea. Russia downed one of our Reaper aircraft a couple of weeks ago. Have we flown those aircrafts into the exact same space since it was downed?
We have flown on the paths that we want to fly in the Black Sea to collect intelligence information.
So that's far from a yes answer. I said, have we flown in the same airspace? You've said we've flown in the paths we want to fly to collect intelligence. So have we adjusted our flight patterns? Have we moved down to that airspace?
We will fly the paths that we feel necessary to collect intelligence information.
So according to an administration official from an article in CNN on March 21st, we're not flying in that airspace to, quote, to avoid being too provocative. So are we removing our aircraft out of the space from which that Reaper flew because we don't want to be too provocative towards Russia?
Senator, you may have heard me say immediately after this incident that I told my counterpart that we're going to fly the skies, the international skies, and sail the seas as we wish. And so we continue to fly in that airspace.
In the exact same airspace where that Reaper was downed?
Again,
you haven't pulled back from Crimea or from the Ukrainian or the Russian coasts?
I recommend we take this to a closed
We
session.
can. I think it answers the question, though, and it gets to the point I'm trying to make here. We continue to deter ourselves against our adversaries. We let Iran launch 83 attacks against us. We only respond 4 times. Russia downs one of our aircraft, and we pull back from that airspace, just like we've been delaying ballistic missile tests over the last 2 years, or over the last year, just like we let a Chinese spy balloon float across the country when we could have downed it across the Aleutians. Now, I don't necessarily think these are Secretary of Defense calls. I think these are Commander-in-Chief calls. But we shouldn't be surprised when our adversaries get emboldened and more aggressive in all these theaters when we continue to deter ourselves.
Have you finished, sir? Thank you, Senator Cotton. Let me recognize Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for your service, not only over many decades, but in this role in particular at a time when the threats are as great as any time that most of us can remember. I've been to Ukraine 3 times over roughly the last year, visiting Kyiv and President Zelensky, and recently followed you, Mr. Secretary, to visit our base in Bavaria, where we are training Ukrainian fighters in the use of Bradley armored vehicles and combined arms. And the bond between our soldiers and their fighters is extraordinary because of our respect for their will to fight. And that's what I've seen in the Ukrainian people. They will fight with pitchforks if necessary, but they need a lot more. And I want to thank you and the President for committing to do whatever it takes. I think I'm almost quoting exactly. And in my view, whatever it takes includes airplanes, aircraft. Would you agree that as a strictly military matter, and you know a lot more about this than most of us at this side of the table, that that kind of air support
First of all, it's phenomenal what we've been able to do and what we've helped Ukraine be the kinds of effects they've been able to achieve based upon our support. And as you know, the United States of America leads the way on that. We talk to our counterparts every week, sometimes multiple times a week. and I meet with them in person every month. And what they need right now, more than anything else, is air defense. And that is the critical need on the battlefield. And they also need long-range fires and armored capability. And we are providing them a real substantial package of capability in terms of platforms, but not just that, we're also providing training, and we're providing sustainment. And sir, you witnessed some of that coming together when you were in Grafenwehr, and I really appreciate you going out there and visiting our troops. But I think those capabilities will make the biggest difference in the near term, and they must be successful, going forward. We know the spring fighting season's in front of us here, and we want to make sure that they have what they need to be successful.
And I apologize for interrupting, Mr. Secretary, but I want to come back to the aircraft because, as you've identified it very clearly, and I agree totally, air defense is critical. We have a narrow window of time, and in fact, this spring will be crucial, and some of our allies are providing planes, but we have the resources, and only we really have the resources to provide the aircraft necessary for fully robust air defense.
So if you're talking F-16s, whenever you make that decision, in order to put together what needs to be put together to provide that capability, is going to be 18 months or so in the making, and that won't help in this current fight. And will they have a capability at some point down the road? We all believe that they will. And what that looks like, it could look like F-16s, it could look like some other fourth-generation aircraft, but we will continue to work with our allies and partners to make sure that Ukraine has what it needs.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. And again, I want to thank you and the President for your commitment, which I think is deeply appreciated by the people of Ukraine as well. I want to focus on a very narrow issue relating to procurement, which is the helicopter acquisition and development for the FLRAA contract. A number of my colleagues and myself had asked the Army for an explanation for the award of that contract to Bell. It's under challenge right now. Will you commit to provide us with an adequate explanation? So far, the Army has been totally unforthcoming.
I will commit, Senator, once the protest is resolved, we will make sure you get a thorough briefing on this issue.
Shouldn't we have it now rather than at some indefinite point in the future?
Well, sir, you know that it's inappropriate to while this is under protest to do that. So I commit to you that as soon as we can, we'll provide you that information.
Thank you. I want to ask one last question. Suicide among our service members continues to be a desperately important problem. I will be meeting later today or this week with the family of Master of Arms Seaman recruit Xavier Mitchell Sandor, who took his own life while he was stationed on the USS George Washington. He was among 3 who committed suicide while that ship was under maintenance and repair. Similar kinds of suicides have happened on other ships under similar circumstances. The report is still outstanding. There have been no completion of the investigation a year after that event. I know you're very concerned about the troops. Nobody cares more than you do about the well-being, and I include the chairman in that sentiment. Can you tell us that additional measures will be taken and that there will be a report forthcoming about Xavier Sandor?
I will. I will make sure that Secretary Del Toro ensures that this investigation moves out in a timely fashion and in a very thorough fashion. I would also tell you that I've asked Secretary Del Toro to make sure that he is personally focused on this issue, specifically related to ships that are in maintenance and the berthing associated with those ships. He has, in this budget, Senator, asked for some $258 billion to address that issue, and I think that's a good start. But I think we need to continue to make sure our leadership's doing the right thing, that we have adequate housing for our young men and women. They are our national assets. And I truly believe that he will remain focused on this, but I will as well. So,
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal. Senator Rounds, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me begin by thanking all of you for your service to our country, recognizing Secretary Austin, not just for your time in uniform, but your time as Secretary as well. General Milley, recognizing your time as Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, but not only that, but the amount of time that you and your family have served our country. We sometimes gloss over that, and I recognize that I don't have a lot of time, but I just want to make this clear. It's not just the time that you spend in the Pentagon, it's the time that you've spent boots on the ground. You've had operational deployments, including the Multinational Force and Observers, Sinai, Egypt, Operation Just Cause in Panama, Operation Uphold Democracy in Haiti, Operation Joint Endeavor, Bosnia, Operation Iraqi Freedom in Iraq, and 3 tours during Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan. You've also deployed to Somalia and Colombia. We thank you for your service to our country, sir, and your family as well, because when you deploy, they're deployed as well. Thank you. Gentlemen, both for Secretary Austin and Chairman Milley, last week you both clarified that you support waiting until the conclusion of the ongoing study before any decision should be made on auctioning parts of or any of the 3.1 to 3.45 gigahertz spectrum band. My question is, should an auction occur before the study is complete, what are the real-world impacts on national security from a defense and budgetary perspective?
they would be devastating, Senator, and it would take us somewhere north of 20 years to try to recover from the loss of that spectrum. Parts of that spectrum are vital to our national defense and the protection of the homeland. And you know, in order to describe exactly, well, you know what the specific platforms are, but we would have to go to a classified session to speak in detail about this. But I would tell you that this is not something you can fix overnight once you break it. It'll take 20 years plus to recover from that.
Thank you. General Milley?
Same thing, Senator. I firmly believe that we should wait till the study is. This is a measure twice, cut once sort of thing. We don't want to vacate it because of the severe national security implications to that. Sharing is obviously a goal for everybody, but it's how you share and the technical capability to do that, and that's what the study should tell us. We want to make a fully informed decision, and the Secretary and I will be making those recommendations in writing to the President when the time comes.
Thank you, sir. Once again for Chairman Milley, as the principal military advisor to the President, would you say that it's essential for you to be able to provide an independent recommendation about spectrum sharing and its impact on national security to the President?
Yes, I do. I would also say, though, that every recommendation I make to the President is an independent best military advice, no matter what the topic. The Secretary is very good about that, and I will always inform the Secretary if I disagree with the Secretary ahead of time. But he and I always are in there together with the President, and I will always make an independent best military advice recommendation. That's what I signed when I was confirmed, that I would do that with the Senate as part of this committee, as part of becoming the confirmation process. So I will always do that, and every chairman should always do that.
Thank you, sir. Secretary Austin, INDOPACOM has listed an unfunded requirement of $147 million for the development of a missile defense system for Guam. Can you discuss how that decision by the Department not to fund this INDOPACOM requirement comports with the Department's priority to defend Guam?
Thanks, Senator. As you know, we have and we continue to invest heavily in the defense of Guam, and that work is ongoing. Again, there are always choices that we have to make in a specific time horizon, and in this case, that is a capability that I think we can and will consider going forward.
I think part of the reason for the question is because there's been some criticism on the department providing a list of unfunded requests. Would you agree that this one should be very seriously considered by Congress?
As you know, Senator, we are required, or the service chiefs and commanders are required by law to submit those unfunded requests, and I do believe that all of our commanders and chiefs believe that what's on there is important. Now, I've asked our commanders and our chiefs to make sure that they build their requirements for readiness and also combat capability into their base budget. And so we try to do that at every turn, but that's, at some point in time, there are choices that you have to make. So.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.